I've long considered myself a media activist and journalist. By pursuing my passion through grassroots mediums for almost a decade, it's given me the opportunity to cross paths with many who are involved in the renaissance of the media revolution. And one of the many people standing out as a vanguard for truth in the information war is a man named James Corbett. He's the one-man band behind the Corbett Report, and he gives cutting and critical analysis every day on a multitude of topics. So to talk about everything from the American education system to the Middle East, I'm joined now by James Corbett, editor, webmaster, writer, producer, and host of the Corbett Report. James, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Abby. I'm a big fan of your work.
So I wanted to start off by asking you about the Trivium method, which is something that I know that you practice. Can you talk about what the Trivium is and why it's so important to learn? And also, I mean, the Trivium, it's something that we don't learn in our education system, and I think we're intentionally dumbed down and not taught critical thinking and logic, but I just wanted to get your take.
Well, that's exactly the point, I think, because what we have here is a system of attaining better sense certainty about the world around us that is so basic and so obvious to most people once they hear about it that it's a wonder that it isn't taught in our schooling system. And I think that is definitely on purpose. Basically, what it amounts to is a system for finding out the who, what, where, when, and why of an event, and then finding out how that relates to the world around it and how we can communicate that to others. And it breaks down into three steps or three processes: finding the logic, which is the details of an event; finding the grammar, which is how those different details go together; and then the rhetoric is how you communicate that to other people or to the outside world. So basically, I mean, it's a very simple three-step process for trying to find out more about the world, to find out how it works, and then communicate that to others. But that has been deliberately taken out of the education system over the past 150 years at the very least, since the Prussian education system has come in to really undermine what we really used to think of as schooling. And it's really changed the way that we perceive the world and the way that we relate to the world in terms of our education. And I think you're exactly right. It's part of a process of dumbing people down so that they don't have the ability to even reason about the world around them.
It is unfortunate, James, and it really does curtail the dialogue that we should be having on a different level, really, about these world events, about the concepts. It seems like we're treated like little children from the establishment, and it's tragic, really. Fortunately, there are people like you who are really pushing this way of thinking, this knowledge onto people, and I hope that people continue to pursue the Trivium. And I wanted to get right into going off the Trivium, going off to just following kind of logic and natural processes of the way that your mind thinks critically. I saw this YouTube video that you made that's called the 9/11 Conspiracy Theory. It's been viewed almost 2 million times at this point. I mean, in the video, you're mocking the term conspiracy theory, used by the establishment, of course, and throwing it back in their faces. Talk about why you did this.
Well, I think that's exactly the point, because conspiracy theory, as I talk about on my podcast quite a bit, is just this term that's become this Pavlovian conditioning technique. And once that's thrown out, we've all been trained to run away from whatever subject is being talked about. So whether that be 9/11 truth or any other subjects that are uncomfortable to the establishment, as long as you can just frame it as conspiracy theory, then you can get people to stop taking a look at it. So that was specifically what I was trying to do with my video there. And to point out that in its most basic sense, what they say happened on 9/11 is a conspiracy theory. It's a theory about Al-Qaeda and how they conspired to carry out the 9/11 attacks. And it's a conspiracy theory that is full of holes and that hasn't really been proven or established in any regards, and in fact has often been shown to be completely outrageously false. And the funny thing about the theory that they're trying to propound is that it is so ridiculous. Once people actually know what that theory is, it's almost difficult for people to look at that story with a straight face. And that's exactly why it came out as a type of comedic video, I guess. I mean, it's certainly got humor to it. It's a sad humor, but it's funny because it is such a ludicrous story that they expect us to believe about what happened on 9/11.
Right. I mean, of course, your dry sarcasm really comes across as just, I mean, it's just a very sad commentary that, yes, we're told these things, we're expected to believe them without any questioning, really, whatsoever. And, even Bush and Cheney testifying together. I mean, there's so many things that you can go off of with everything before 9/11, during the commission report, and the cover-up, the subsequent cover-up. Let's talk about false flags, though, which is something that you also speak to quite a bit. Why is it that well-documented historical accounts like the Reichstag fires, like the Gulf of Tonkin, why aren't they not more well-known in the historical account when people just talk about history?
Well, precisely because that's the type of history that's dangerous for people to know about on a wide scale. And this is, again, exactly the type of thing that's deliberately kept out of the education system, so that people are meant to sit there in history class mindlessly absorbing names and dates and faces and trying to memorize them for tests, instead of learning some of the actual history that is just absolutely astounding. And I don't know about other people out there, but when I started to find this out for myself, obviously long after I'd left the public education system, I was absolutely floored by some of the things that I encountered. For example, the Gulf of Tonkin and other now admitted staged terrorist attacks. And this is, again, the type of thing that in certain circles is openly talked about, in circles that kind of go beyond what is presented in most of the mainstream media. So that, for example, recently on my podcast, I was highlighting how Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter's former national security advisor, openly talks about things like false flag terrorist attacks. And in fact, he was warning the Senate Armed Services Committee back in 2007 about a possible staged terrorist attack to lead us to war with Iran. So this is the type of thing that's openly discussed in certain circles, but if you bring it up in mainstream dialogue, again, it's branded with this conspiracy theorist label. So once again, it's just a question of finding out about the real documentable, verifiable history of this technique and how it's been used in the past.
And how unfortunate is it that, decades later, of course, we find out the stuff about the Gulf of Tonkin, and it's like, well, that was so long ago. I mean, who cares? It's just kind of brushed under the rug. And even the JFK assassination, I mean, there's so many things that we don't know about yet. RFK Jr. just came out and said he doesn't believe the official narrative. He thinks that it's completely impossible. In fact, his whole family thinks the Warren Commission is, quote, shoddy workmanship. I mean, these are things that, unfortunately, the truth ekes out so long after the events that it's just so unfortunate, James, and yes, we should be talking about and addressing the glaring reality of these things right now. But let's talk about alternative media. You've said yourself there are two types of alternative media. There's the establishment alternative media, and then there's kind of the other alternative media. How do you differentiate between them?
Well, the establishment alternative media is a media that is demonstrably quite a bit better than the mainstream media, the establishment media per se, but is ultimately funded by a lot of the same players behind the scenes. And it goes back to I think, funding being one of the key sources. And when you have some of these robber baron type family trusts that have been set up to basically direct society in certain ways, when you have them funding some of these so-called alternative media outlets, you start to encounter a lot of problems with certain coverage and certain places that these outlets won't go to. For example, 9/11 Truth. So for example, my colleague Sibel Edmonds of BoilingFrogsPost.com has written extensively about this on her website, and about some of the ways that she has attempted to resist all of this and has refused to take any foundation funding or allow any of that, because as she puts it, basically as soon as you start allowing foundation funding through your website or through the media portal or whatever it may be that you're running, they immediately demand to create a board of directors and to put certain people on that board to influence the decisions of what happens on that media platform from then on, etc., etc. And as she points out, she's seen it happen so many times, time and again, with the various organizations that she's been involved with, that she definitely doesn't want that to happen to her website or what's going on. So I think, broadly speaking, we see this differentiation between a true, real, independent, grassroots, viable alternative media that is not funded by the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and all of these well-known names.
I'm so sorry, James. We have to wrap it up. We're running out of time. But of course, yeah, getting the grants and everything for these media outlets and Sibel is great. And so is your website is excellent. James Corbett from the Corbett Report. Really appreciate your time. Awesome to have you on.
Thank you, Abby.